Hello and welcome along to Mondo Chelloveck Movies. My name is John, and this video is going to be my re-ranking of Stanley Kubrick's 13 movies. So the previous ranking was where those movies sat in my head at that point. I hadn't watched some of these for quite a while, and I was interested to see when I watched the 13 back to back how they would change. Now, they could have stayed exactly the same, but I can tell you they've changed quite a lot. It's amazing because I thought I quite knew these movies, but when you go back and you watch these with fresh eyes and you pay complete attention to these movies and see them for what they can kind of alter quite drastically. And some of the ones, spoiler alert, I love all of these movies, even though some of them have dropped down quite a bit and some of them have shot up quite a bit. It's got nothing to do with the movies that I haven't enjoyed them this time around. I've enjoyed them all immensely. And with some of these films, I feel like I've got a lot more out of them this time round. So at number 13, down four places, previously at number 9, is 1953's Fear and Desire. This is Stanley Kubrick's first film. Now, I had this movie up quite high in my list before, and I really enjoyed this movie, and I really enjoyed it this time round. The only thing I think about this movie is that it should have been a bit longer. It's only about just over an hour long. Now, one thing I noticed about this movie that I didn't really notice before was that the sort of commanders from one army and the other army, the opposing army, and you don't really find out what they're fighting for or who the real armies are. They're played by the same people, but they're different characters, which I thought was a bit odd. And when I watched it, I thought, hang on a minute, that general there is a general from the Americans, and I think the Germans as well. I think it's quite bizarre, actually. I don't know what that was all about. The film's in black and white. It looks amazing. I did say on my previous video that most of these will be coming out in 4K. I think this one's not out 4K yet, but it will be. Now, I was going to say on my previous video, I was going to upgrade as many as I could. I've only upgraded one thus far on 4K, which I'll talk about later on. A lot of people say that they don't think this is a good Stanley Kubrick film. Well, I don't agree with that. I think that this movie has got a lot of stuff going into it. I mean, that the whole where they're going into like raid the opposing armies, like barracks and all that. That's really good, really well set up, and quite. It's quite a chilling movie in a way for what it depicts in a fashion. So anyway, at number 13, that's Fear and Desire. At number 12, up one place from 13, is 1955's Killer's Kiss. Now, Killer's Kiss is the extra movie on this disc. This is a great Arrow Academy release. It's still available. It's a great story, noir-esque, where this boxer unwittingly gets involved with this woman and tries to sort of save her relationship, but it's not that simple. That's what a great noir is. You kind of get all these bits thrown at you and you think, oh, this is the story's going this way and it goes a completely different way. But a really good movie and I really enjoyed it. A lot more than I did the first time around. So that number 12, that's Killer's Kiss. At number 11, this might surprise a few people. It certainly surprised me. Dropping to three places, it was number 8, is 1987's Full Metal Jacket. Now, I put this on, and I've got to say, this is the first time I watched it in 4K, and the 4K is spectacular. I thought it was like two different movies, 4K wise. I thought the training part was going to be a bit lesser, and when I go into battle at the end would be a bit better. It is quite like that, but really all the way through this movie is kind of looks really spectacular, and the sound quality on this is absolutely brilliant as well. So as a 4K, I can highly recommend this. It's not the best Stanley Kubrick 4K, but for this movie, it's a really solid 4K. Now, why did it slip down three places? Well, when I was watching it, I've watched this film quite a few times, and I've seen it, and to be honest, the whole end of the movie, I couldn't even remember it. I was watching it and thinking, what happens when they go into battle? It sort of just drew a massive blank on it, and I really enjoyed that bit. The first half, however, is when obviously they've got this fella here, and he's getting sort of really he can't cut the mustard, and he's getting picked on by the sort of sergeant major, and his life is really in ruins, and he's getting really beasted by everybody in the squadron, and it's just quite harrowing, really, what this guy has to go through. Now, when I watched it this time around, it came across that this fella who's played amazingly by this actor, can't remember his name now. He seems to come across like somebody who has some kind of learning disability. It does seem that way, and it's probably a fact of life that in war that these people do get picked on and kind of abused, like physically and mentally. And it didn't really sit well with me, the fact that it came across in this movie that this fella was sort of vulnerable, and he got really sort of, it was, everybody was picking on him at one point. I really found it quite shocking, actually. It was funny because I didn't really remember that from my first watches, and I didn't really remember the ending from my first watches. So this movie was like a kind of first time watch for me in a fashion. But as good this movie is, and I don't think it's not a great movie at all. It's just that the first half of the movie didn't quite sit right with me. I thought the performance is amazing. I do think this whole, and it's very Stanley Kubrick. But I've got to be honest about it. This sort of took my enjoyment of this movie down that couple of notches. So at number 11, that's Full Metal Jacket. So at number 10, up two places from number 12, is 1956's The Killing. Now, when I watched this movie, I knew it was a noir. And to be honest, when I'm watching it, I thought I didn't mustn't take too much notice of it the first time around because this movie is spectacular. I can't wait to get this on 4K. There's a 4K upgrade of this one and Killer's Kiss from Kino Loba. And this one just really spoke to me. It just I had this whole noir thing of this gang who go with this fella here who says, right, I've got this really good plan to go to the race course and get all this. When they take all the winnings from the people, they are going to go and steal the whole lot, and they're going to go away with it. Now, what happens? Well, of course, it all without any spoilers, it all doesn't really go to plan, and it's about the whole aftermath of how they get all these people in. The characters in here are amazing. And this fella here, Sterling Hayden, he plays a great part. In fact, all the people in here play great parts. There's a subplot as well with this woman in here who's not what she says she is, and it's just absolutely brilliant. I think looking at these two, this one and Killer's Kiss, I wish that Stanley Kubrick had done more noir films because I think he was absolutely brilliant at doing this. And if he'd done more films at this point, it would have been a great noir box set and probably some of the best noir films you would ever see. So highly recommended this. And I've got to say, without spoilers, the last sentence in this movie is quite amazing. So at number 10, that's The Killing. At number 9, down two places, is 1957's Paths of Glory. This is, I mean, when these movies are dropping down, it's nothing, I haven't got anything to say about this. It's just my enjoyment of this particular movie at this point was a bit less than some of the other ones. Now, when I watched, I'll probably what I'll do is with these movies is probably every year I'll probably pull them out and I'll watch them, all 13 sort of back to back because I had a great experience watching these chronologically. And I think that these movies are something I would, because they're quite easy to watch, the 13 movies, not too many, even though some are quite long. But the performance of Kirk Douglas in here is absolutely amazing. What I'm going to do actually, I'm going to do a follow-up video to this, and I'm going to do the best performances, I think, from the Stanley Kubrick films, maybe the top 10. And because I found that some of the performances of these actors and these characters in here were unbelievable. But this one here is just a great movie all round. We do go into it when you watch it, know that it's more sort of like a courtroom drama and quite emotional with it. And it's not a sort of out and out war film, even though there's war stuff in it. And I'm pretty sure as well that this movie it doesn't really tell you too much about the war. There is a war, some people are fighting, and you don't really know who the sort of armies are, which I found quite interesting. And actually, you don't really need to find out who the people are at war. It's just the fact that this movie depicts the futility of war, like to the max, because of this whole courtroom drama where these people are getting tried for deserting, apparently. But it's based on a real story as well, actually. That this thing kind of really happened in a war somewhere. Wow, can you believe it? So anyway, at number 9, that's Paths of Glory. At number 8, dropping down three places, is 1963's Lolita. I think this movie is absolutely brilliant. Every time I watch it, I'm really amazed by how despicable James Mason is in this movie. Humbert Humbert, this character's called. And the characters in here, the cast as well. It's absolutely brilliant. And also as well, that doesn't get talked about hardly enough is the fact that after I pointed out to him, that's Peter Sellers. Peter Sellers in here is incredible as well. He plays three parts, and that's quite pertinent to the story. This movie here is past, well, it's its 50th anniversary this year. It's coming, it should be on a 4K. It's got to be on a 4K, although it's been 4K screened around the world. So this movie isn't really talked about enough. And obviously with the subject there, you would be thinking it's a certain type of movie. Well, to me, just kind of, yes, that sort of elements in it, but don't really think about it that way. There's much more to this movie. It's such a clever, funny, strange movie with fantastic performances in black and white. It looks absolutely brilliant. that I can't recommend it highly enough. But I keep saying, some of these movies have went up strangely, have went up in my estimations when I've watched them again. Like I say, I went in with this with fresh eyes and just said, whatever happens to these movies happens. If something goes really, through the stratosphere, great. If something drops down to the bottom, it doesn't matter because I think all these movies are highly recommended. But this one here, don't put it to one side and think I'm not never going to try it. Do try it, and it's not really probably what the movie you think it's going to be. At number 8, that's Lolita. At number 7, this movie really surprised me. Going up 3 places is 1960s Spartacus. Now, previously on my first video, I'd said that this movie didn't really appeal to me. It's one of these movies I've tried quite a few times and not really been that sort of interested in. I'm watching these for the first time on my OLED TV as well, all the 4Ks. So this movie looked absolutely sensational. It's one of the best 4Ks I've ever seen. It looked, the colours is just, and the sharpness is just second to none. It's absolutely brilliant. I watched this movie in 2 halves. I watched it half one day, half the next day, and I couldn't wait to get back to this movie to finish it off. I really love this movie. I don't know why I sort of got it this time round. I didn't get it the first time, but I think that the performances from these actors here, Kirk Douglas, and also as well the female star in here, Jean Simmons, she was absolutely brilliant. It's probably the first movie I've ever really took any notice of her and thought, wow, what a great actress she is. But this is just, in the 4K is just amazing. Charles Lawton in here is unbelievable. Peter Ustinov is incredible. This movie is just, it's one of those movies where I could see myself watching this. This one might go up even further on my list. Now, it's funny enough because when you think about it, when I first went to this movie, I thought, it's one of the ones where I thought, oh God, I've got to watch Spartacus now. It's one of the ones where I thought, it's not going to be one I'm going to be really invested in. I'm going to try and keep awake when I'm watching it. But far from it, it's just amazing when you're sort of just think, right, I'm going to pay full attention to a movie for what it is. It might really work with us, it might not. I was so pleased to see this movie for what it was for probably the first time. So at number 7, that's Spartacus. So at number 6, moving up 5 places, it's the highest moving film on this list, is 1999's Eyes Wide Shut. This is another one that I thought I don't really want to watch this again. I watched it once. It was all right. Didn't really enjoy it that much, or didn't think there was a lot of bits in that didn't really sort of like bother us. There was a huge sort of like argument session in this, which really got me nerves. And I thought I wasn't really invested too much in Tom Cruise, even though I thought he played a great part in it. I thought, well, does he actually fit this movie? Nicole Kidman as well was a little bit, just not really my cup of tea at that point. So when I watched this again, fresh eyes and all that, I had such a good time this movie. I was really amazed that when I watched it, it actually flew over. This movie's, I've only watched it once, it really dragged for me. This one just flew over this time, and I thought this is absolutely brilliant. I think all of the performances in here are great. Tom Cruise is a bit young. I think he should be a bit older, but that's about the only gripe I've got with this movie. And actually, the whole scene, when I was prepared to fast forward the scene when they were arguing, I thought, I don't know if I can sit through this again. For me, that flew over as well. It wasn't really anything like that really got me nerves this time. And it's funny, actually, Nicole Kidman this time around really sounded like she was playing a sort of Jack Nicholson character, for want of a better word, a sort of drawl that she was speaking in, like very slow. Actually, all the sort of language in this, or the lines in this, are really slow, really sort of like stilted and like delivered really oddly to a certain extent. But I think that's great. This movie is quite an odd movie in itself, but it's really Stanley Kubrick-esque as well. And this has got to get a 4K because on the Blu-ray looks really good, but you can tell there's a lot more they can do with this. So such a surprising jump for me. The same with Spartacus. Couldn't believe how much this come up the ranks. I was prepared this to go right to the bottom. But it's amazing when you watch these things and you take a fresh perspective and you sit and actually like you watch these for what they are. It's amazing what you can sort of get out of these movies. So at number 6, that's Eyes Wide Shut. So before I get into my top 5, the next ranking I was going to do was with David Lynch. Now what I'm going to do with him is because the Dune, which is coming out at the end of the month, I don't really want to watch his version of Dune because that'll kind of maybe spoil the film for me. So I'm going to leave David Lynch for another time. I'm going to go to another one, probably Quentin Tarantino, and watch his movies first of all, and do a re-ranking of his movies. So David Lynch will probably be at the end of the year as opposed to being next up. So at number 5, moving up 1 place, is 1964's Doctor Strangelove. or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. I have upgraded this movie to 4K. At the moment, I've got the Blu-ray slip on here because it never came with a slip, which is a travesty in itself. I will be upgrading and going to my good friend James in Jam Slips, link to his channel down below, link to his Instagram account down below. And if you want a custom made slip, well, you know how I feel about them. Get yourself over to him like I'm going to do for this one, and get yourself a custom slip. This movie again, it's one of the ones where you're going with a certain, what you remember of it. I think I've seen this 2 or 3 times. At first, I didn't really get this movie. I'm seeing what I remember these movies, but I'm also getting other things as well. I'm getting things that I don't really notice about these movies. I know this movie is a sort of really good comedy, but I didn't realize how funny this movie was. And some of the people in here, some of the way it's obviously another one to do with the futility of the war. And Sterling Hayden, who was in The Killing, his character in here, and that's not a spoiler alert, but he starts this war off, or instigates this war over the most ridiculous thing ever. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you will not believe it because when I watched this, I thought, wow, I've completely missed what the war was started about. And when you find out what it was, when he comes out with this stuff, when he's having a conversation with Peter Sellers, who's got another few, he's got another few characters in here as well. Has he got 2 or 3? And Doctor Strangelove in here, it's he's not in it that much. It's because you think, has he ever come into this movie? But he's so good, and the whole performances with his arm and all that. Oh my God, it's just such a good movie. It's so different. It was probably so ahead of its time. And another movie that maybe it'll go up even further in my list. Now, the 4K in here, I wouldn't say it was the best 4K. It's definitely better than the Blu-ray, but it's not super great. It's quite grainy in places, but it's still got good sharpness in other places. So at number 5, that's Doctor Strangelove. At number 4, dropping down 2 places, is 1975's Barry Lyndon. This movie, 3 hours long, and I thought I'll put it on and I'll see how far I get through it because I watched this in 2 halves the first time around and I just watched it all the way through completely. It is such a good movie, this. It's another one a bit like Lolita. It just gets forgotten about. This movie should not be ignored. Yes, it is a costume drama, which to me, sounds boring. I'm not into them things, but the the story about this fella goes through his whole life. It's fascinating. It's based on a story, actually. I don't think it's a real story, but it's actually based on a book. But Stanley Kubrick, I think, has changed a few things around, which he does usually with books that he films. But yeah, stellar performances. It looks really spectacular. It's got to come out with 4K. This is the one that's really I would love to see in 4K because I would imagine what they can get out of this movie because it looks great on Blu-ray. And don't forget, this movie is only filmed in natural light. There's no actual lights in this movie, which is crazy to think that this could have happened, but it did, and it works. It's not dark or anything. It is dark, but dark in a good way. So again, this movie's dropped down, but that's not saying anything bad about this movie. And to be honest, you never know. When this movie comes out in 4K, I might watch it again, and maybe next year I might do this whole again, and this might go to number 1. Who knows? It's fascinating, actually. I've had such a good time with doing this. Now, I recommend if anyone's got the whole uh, collection of Stanley Kubrick or all the movies, get them all watch them in chronological order, and just see where you're going with them. I know a few people are doing that. I think it's great. It's a great way to experience his movies, and you can see them actually progressing or taking different slants. So at number 4, that's Barry Lyndon. At number 3, going at one place, is 1968's 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, back in the day, if I'd ranked all these movies or ranked my thoughts of these movies, this one would probably been down at the bottom, maybe even the bottom. As I've said in many videos, this movie is one that I've tried to watch countless times and never got through it. But recently, when I got the 4K a couple of years ago, well, about 2018, I thought, right, I'm going to try this one out. And then if it's not going to cut it with me, that's just the way it goes. But I loved it. Now, on every watch since then, I think I watched this once the third time I've watched the 4K. I like this movie more and more as it goes on. And I said before, movie doesn't make sense, but every time I watch it, it makes a little bit more sense. This movie is never going to completely make sense, but I don't mind that. This movie looks spectacular. It's got some of the most incredible special effects from the 60s you will ever see. Now, this movie kind of comes across like a movie in 3 parts. You have got the beginning of man at the start with the cavemen. You've got kind of another story in the middle, and then you've got this story at the end. Now, the only thing that keeps these stories together is these monoliths that appear in it. Now, yeah, it's a bit crazy to say the least, but there is a kind of, I think, a bit of a message behind that. Well, I'm getting anyway. And yeah, I just thought this movie was such a great movie, and I love the ending of it, even though the ending is crazy. And I think when you're younger and you watch a movie like this and it doesn't make sense, you just think, right, I'm never watching that again. Even though I never got through the ending on my first couple of watches, it just, I seem to tail off halfway through this movie. But another one, if you've got this in your collection, do give this a watch. Don't leave it sitting on the shelf. So get the time set aside to watch this movie. Put your phone down, put it on the charge, get rid of it for a couple hours, and you'll be amazed at this movie. I know I was. But you need to sort of really pay attention to it. You will never understand it, but you will get so much out of it. So at number three, that's 2001, A Space Odyssey. So that leaves two movies. Now, speaking of jam slips, this is a jam slips exclusive slip. Now, I asked him, say, could you do me a Clockwork Orange one? Because my good friend Michael Hewitt came back from America and got me the American 4K of Clockwork Orange. This is in the slimmer US case. Now, I said to James, I said, could you do me a slipcover for this one? And could you make it the artwork completely different to anything else? So he said, yeah. So he sent me four things and I picked this one. Now you will see that the color on this is just absolutely incredible. I mean, look at that, the detail. And also with James has put me in this little thing as well, which I think this is going to get in my studio. It's not a garage, it's a studio. That's going to get put in there, and that's going to be up on the wall framed. The question is, when I've got these two, what's going to be two and what's going to be number one? So at number two is a Clockwork Orange dropping down one place. Now, I'm surprised at this. I've got to say, I'm really surprised with this. And I'll say, what of my 16 or 17 versions of Clockwork Orange did I watch? And I'll tell you which one I watched. I watched this one, which was sent to me by my good friends Rob and Kelvin from the Preons, the band. That's a note there from them. They sent me this one, and I watched this one, and I thought it looked absolutely. I watched this before in 4K. This is the second time I watched this 4K. I watched a different one in 4K. I'm going to watch every time I watch this movie, I'll watch it on a different release. This is the first time I've seen this one. Now, this movie for me is, as you know, it's my favorite book of all time. I love this movie. It doesn't do anything wrong for me. But obviously, I'll talk about in a second. Another movie just took me by surprise. Well, not by surprise, but really just spoke to me. I love this movie. Like I say, there's everything about. I can't speak highly enough about it. The 4K I think is brilliant, even though some people say it's not colourful enough. But I think it's the way it was intended to be shot. I just think that this movie just offers so much. It's so strange. It's so odd. It's full of Stanley Kubrick isms. It's got everything for me. It's just got this alternative language, which is brilliant. This nadsat that they talk. I just love the way it looks, sounds, and everything about it. Spectacular. But of course, one movie topped it on this watch. Will this one go back there number one? You never know. It probably will. It's one of those ones where I don't think it'll drop down anymore. This movie's just too good to drop down anymore. But you never know. Something may come up and just surpass it. But that's not taking anything away from it. And I'd say I didn't like this movie when I watched it. It's just another movie was a little bit better for me on this watch than this one was. So at number two, that's A Clockwork Orange. So that leaves going up two places, 1980s The Shining. Well, what can I say? This is a brilliant movie and it's probably been top of my list before. But on this watch, for some reason, it just came alive much more than I was expecting it to. It's funny on these rewatches when these movies will take a bit of a different turn when you think this is definitely in a certain slot and I know it's going to stay there. And for some reason, you just watch it and you think, you know what it is? This is giving me so much pleasure in this way. This set here is just absolutely amazing. Actually, this set here was the first time I'd ever really watched a video kind of from Euphoria Pictures linked to his channel down below. Now, I was starting to watch Keith's channel and I noticed this one straight away. Now, I had this one in 4K. I just had the 4K standard one. And when I saw this getting unboxed on his channel, I thought, I have got to get myself one of them. This movie, when I watched it, I was just so, just the whole look of it, and then what I did was after it, I went on YouTube and I watched loads and loads of like conspiracy videos about this movie. What does this mean? What does the ending mean? What's this about? Why does he do this? Is Jack such and such? Is that all these subplots like do pop up? And actually, when I was watching this movie, there was a lot more of these subplots kind of came to light with me. I saw this movie in a different light than I did when I watched it again. Now, this is what I like about Stanley Kubrick movies. You can just watch some movies just once, they're great. You can watch them again, you get such a blast out of them. But I think with Stanley Kubrick movies, for some reason, they seem to just like hold things back and you'll see things in a different light. You'll see things that you just don't remember in there, or a different flavor, or a setting that'll be different, have different perspective when you watch it the next time. And that's the sort of the joy of Stanley Kubrick movies. Even if you don't really particularly like a movie, like say 2001 for me, or Spartacus, you can go back to it and you think, wow, I'm kind of stunned at how much I do like this Eyes Wide Shut as well. I thought that was a movie that I'd watch once and then have to watch for this re-ranking and then just never bother with again. You want to just put in the shelf, probably upgrade to 4K, watch the 4K and just say, well, I've got it, it's there, and that's just the way it is. But far from it. I was so pleased I did this, and the way I did this, I watched them all back to back, more or less. It's a really concise filmography and watch in quite a short period of time. Unfortunately, I wish there was more Stanley Kubrick films. I think he had a lot more movies he could have made. Unfortunately, I think it was just down to the fact he was a perfectionist and he wanted to spend more time on some of the movies. Thanks for watching this re-ranking. It's the first one I've ever done, I think, and I really enjoyed it. I've got another couple coming up. I've got Friday the 13th ones. I've got obviously David Lynch, which will have to be put on a back burner till I watched the second part of June. I think that's the whole movie done if that's the case. Can't wait to see that one. Actually, really enjoyed the first one. Then I will watch his movies in succession. I did watch the first two, but I'm gonna have to go back and watch them and see if that re-ranking does change as much as this one has done, because this one's really surprised me, probably a lot more than I thought. I probably thought I was going to come on, maybe give the ranking exactly the same, more or less, and just go through a bit more of my thoughts with it. But far from it. I urge anybody who's got the full lot of them, dig them out, watch them, and just have such a blast with them, because that's what they are. They are so enjoyable and so technically a masterpiece. So, thanks for watching. You take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers. I'm Spartacus.